Good day, welcome to Bet Safe. We are talking Formula One. Myself, Pete Colley, and Johnny Herbert. Johnny, what can we learn from Melbourne at the weekend? And obviously, a Vettel win.
We've got a championship on. That's what we can take from Australia. We were speaking about it beforehand, weren't we? We were sort of saying Ferrari look good in testing. Are they going to get it together when we actually get to the race weekend itself? Are Mercedes going to turn up the wick, which is what we normally see? Qualifying, we saw, yes, Lewis Hamilton do a great job. Then it was the race. Total different dynamic. The tyres were working in a different way. Sebastian did a cracking race, being able to use the tyres in the right way. We had a little bit of radio communication from Lewis, a bit frustrated the way things were going. His teammate Valtteri Bottas actually caught him up towards the end of the race. Then the other Ferrari, Kimi Raikkonen, suffered a little bit with understeer, a bit of an imbalance with the car, so he was only able to finish fourth. So from a championship perspective, it's going to be brilliant, because there are going to be certain tracks that the Ferrari is going to work very well at, which is what we discussed a little bit before, and of course there are going to be certain ones where the Mercedes is going to be very quick as well. But we've got a really tight pack at the front end, especially with that Mercedes and that Ferrari, and Red Bull a little bit further back, didn't really sort of come together for them. But the battle at the front, yeah.
Is it game on then? Because I mean, Lewis Hamilton started. He said before the race, "Oh, I think Ferrari are the team to watch," and it sounded like a bit of gamesmanship at the time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Was he actually genuinely meaning that? And is that going to be the whole toe-to-toe throughout this championship, do you think?
Well, I know Mercedes were genuinely worried after the testing that was there, so they knew there was going to be a threat there. I think they were probably confident enough going to Australia thinking, actually, I think we've got enough in the bag. They did in qualifying. That one lap, ultimate speed they seemed to have over Ferrari showed in qualifying in Australia. But of course the race dynamic is always a very different scenario, and that's where I think Toto Wolff came out and sort of said, you know, Ferrari had the pace on us. I don't think they've got the ultimate pace, that qualifying lap as I just discussed, that really sort of pushing on the edge, feeling what the cars and moving around underneath you and then getting a quick lap in. But it's the race where I think Ferrari, even historically to be honest, even when Fernando Alonso was racing Ferrari a good few years back, they always had a good race car, a very easy car, and a car that the driver is easy to adapt to and understand what he is feeling through the tyre to the tarmac, and how he is then able to get the best from the car. So Mercedes, yes, they were worried. Probably weren't so worried when we saw the qualifying. They thought, we're going to be okay there, we've just got enough gap. But then of course it was a different scenario in the race at all. Strategy, did they make the wrong call? Because when Lewis came in, he came out into traffic. That really didn't help him at all. And then Sebastian was able to just do a few more laps, I think it was able to get out in front, and then he was able to control it from that point onward. So a good start for Sebastian and for Ferrari, and I think that's going to continue, because the car is good in the race, and that is where this championship is going to be won or lost. Doesn't matter what happens in qualifying, helps you on the grid of course, but it is what happens in the race, and you've got to have a car, as I said before, underneath you can adapt to, you can feel what it's doing, because you're going to get the best from yourself and the best from the team at the same time, and motivation is going to get stronger at Ferrari as well.
What's going to happen? We saw the new bigger cars, the chunkier, but is this going to make overtaking difficult? Because that looked to be Lewis Hamilton's problem, didn't it? That he just couldn't get past. It's
a difficult one. You know, Australia is not your norm for as far as the tracks are concerned. And I say that because the way the corners are quite long. You go through into turn one, for example, you brake, you turn, it's the exit. It's a long sort of left-hander, and if you're trying to get tucked underneath him down to the next straight in towards turn three, it's very difficult, because that corner is so long, and all this sort of dirty air that these newer cars are distributing behind makes it more difficult for the cars to follow. So Australia's a difficult one. Everybody sort of said it was impossible to overtake effectively. We did see some overtaking going on out on the track, but it's also going to be down to what happens at the next one, which is China's coming along. They're very similar. You know, you go through sort of turns, I think it's 7, 8, 9. They're long, fast left-hander, followed by sort of a longish right-hander as well. Then you go into a sort of a, I don't know, 90 degree, 2 90 degree left-handers. Then you go onto the back straight, the very, very long straight, I think it's 1.2 kilometres long. It's a long, long right-hander, and it's going to be difficult for that car to be able to follow from that perspective to get the slipstream down the straight. The DRS, which is something that didn't really help anybody overtaking Australia. And I think China, a little bit longer the straight, all depends where they're going to sort of put that DRS itself, maybe enable the cars to overtake down that back straight into the tight right-hander at the end, just before the start-finishing line. So they're very similar from that perspective. So the drivers are going to have to really concentrate a lot to try and place themselves, look after the tyres. And I think that's what we saw from Sebastian Vettel, for example. He was always there knowing that he couldn't really attack Lewis. Then he sort of dropped back again. And then just before Lewis pitted in Australia, he was just on the back of him again. So it's almost like he had a very good understanding of how he needed to look after those tyres. Just look after him a little bit, then he can push that little bit more. Now that may be the same thing when we get to China, where you're going to have to think about, where am I going to have to save these tyres, or when am I going to have to save these tyres? And then I've got to position myself when these tyres are at their very, very best to then be able to make that move. So there's a lot of tactical stuff going in the pit lane itself with all the engineers. Then there's the drivers. They've got to sort of do it when they're actually on the racetrack. They can't be helped by radio communication of, you know, look after the tyres, this, that or the other, because they don't know what's going on underneath it. And it's those very, very best drivers who are going to shine.
Did the Mercedes show an inability to be able to perform in dirty air, or?
Well, there was a lot of talk about that last season, where the Mercedes, when it was in traffic, it didn't really sort of pass the cars as expectedly, as in easily. But then you saw it the other way around with the Ferrari, as I said, when it was behind Lewis Hamilton. So I think it's just the generation of car that we've got that I think both are going to struggle that a little bit more. And I said about Lewis, when they came out of the pit stop, he was in that traffic, he struggled to sort of get past. But it just seemed to be a general thing that was going out on the racetrack itself. So I don't think it is necessarily a Mercedes problem. I think it is just going to be a general problem that the cars are going to find it at certain tracks, not all the tracks. These long corners, they're the ones that you're really going to have. So Australia, as I said, has got those, and China's got an element of those as well. But then it changes. You know, we're going to go to Russia, for example, and that's going to be a different scenario. Bahrain. You know, so the ingredients are going to be something that isn't necessarily a negative with Mercedes.
Can Red Bull mount a challenge, do you think?
They can. Yeah, too early. I think at this point of the season, one race down, they weren't quite where they wanted to be. They didn't quite have that sort of attack mode or ability to be able to sort of just push, to be able to be competitive with the guys in front. Now we know Kimi was struggling in Australia, but it wasn't Red Bull who were the ones who were sort of there to sort of capitalise on a Ferrari that wasn't working at its very best. Now if it's a Ferrari working not at its best, but it's still ahead of a Red Bull, that just shows that Red Bull have just got to do that little bit more work over the sort of coming weeks and months. But you always think, I think we discussed this before, they always develop very, very well, and they're always able to get the car better. The one thing that is slightly different than what we've had over the last couple of seasons, Red Bull's always been a good chassis. Always, always, always. Suffered with the Renault engine. That's been its sort of bugbear. Doesn't seem to be the case this time around. The car doesn't seem to be as good as a Ferrari or as good as a Mercedes as it was in the last 2 years. It just seems to be a good car. And maybe they just haven't quite got it fully sorted to the degree that they need to be able to take that challenge. They're not far behind, for sure. They're not that far behind. But if you go to China, they were not that bad last year. Kvyat had a cracking race last year. Remember, into turn one, Sebastian went a little bit wide. He threw it up the inside. Then Sebastian started to spin. He hit Kimi, and then everything was going on. And of course, Mercedes had trouble. Lewis Hamilton had trouble. You know, he started 22nd on the grid, dead last because of the power unit problem he had in qualifying. So all these little ingredients can still come into play. But I think overall, we've got a good situation at the moment, because we've still got a little bit of an unknown. We've got a car that's going very well at the moment, the Ferrari. The Merc we know is always going to be there or thereabouts, and it's hopefully the Red Bull that's going to come into play as well.
If Williams look like they're going to dominate the sort of chasing pack, where do McLaren find themselves today, looking ahead to China?
Well, actually, I thought they performed better than I thought they were. You know, I think Fernando, especially, just outside that top 10, ran in the top 10 in the race for quite a long time. It was only in that latter point he lost out. Ocon taking that final 10th place for Force India. He did a very good job. Sergio Perez as well. So there's that middle pack is very, very tough for them, and with the likes of Felipe Massa doing such a good job in Australia, with the likes of Force India, Sergio and Esteban Ocon doing a good job as well. That's sort of who they're up against. But at the moment, those two teams have the advantage. So going into China, it's got a long straight. We know that they've sort of got a bit of a problem with their power unit. We know they're sort of down on power by about 20 kilometres. It was in Barcelona when we discussed before. That's something that's going to take a little bit of time, development, to get closer. So we're going to a track that's got start-finish straight, pretty long, and that long back straight at the same time. So I would guess that's going to be a track that they're going to probably suffer a little bit more, because they just haven't got the power unit that needs to push that car through the air and down that long back straight and be in the right place at the right time. Even if they get in front, they're just going to be passed very easily.
Yeah. For you then, who's the driver of the day and the team of the day?
Team of the day, I suppose you've got to say Ferrari, just because of the hard work that they've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's sort of taken them longer than I think everybody else expected to get to this point of being able to win races, but to challenge for a championship, which seems to be where they're at the present time. But then I have to say Romain Grosjean in qualifying, fantastic for Haas, brilliant result for them. So we have to see how that sort of plays out for them. But then I think the driver of the day had to be someone who controlled the situation brilliantly. I think he sort of understood how he needed to work those tyres. He understood what he needed to do at certain parts of the race to get himself in the right position to beat Lewis Hamilton, and that was Sebastian Vettel. I thought he did a cracking race, and I'm pleased for him. There's a lot of critics who sort of say, he had the best car when he was at Red Bull, that's why he won his 4 World Championships. And I think Australia showed why he won those 4 World Championships, because he's one of the very, very best out there.
Let's look at the odds then after Australia. Bet safe odds for the championship. Lewis Hamilton with a Mercedes evens. Fair?
Yeah, fair, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Sebastian Vettel 4-3 with the Ferrari. Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes 9-1.
That's a very good one.
Yeah, and it's improved, hasn't it, because of Australia, because of what he, that he showed that he could compete.
Exactly, and a 9-1 where he probably should have beaten Lewis Hamilton if there wasn't the sort of team sort of, I think, keeping them sort of in that position. He did a really, really strong race. So if he can do a strong race in his very first Grand Prix, he's only going to get the comfort factor, and when he gets the comfort factor, then he's going to be more competitive as well. So there's a lot of good stuff is going to come from Valtteri Bottas.
He's one to watch for me, I think.
Indeed,
I'm keeping an eye on him. Here's a good one as well. Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari, 16-1. Now, I think we were looking last week, and we were looking at, I think it was about 12 or something like that, and we were going, that could be good.
Yeah.
At 16-1, he's in the
Getting
Ferrari.
Better. Yeah. And he had a car that wasn't working as he wanted, and he still finished 4th. So from that point of view, I think we've got a situation where when it comes right for Kimi, I think we discussed this partly before, but when it comes right for Kimi, he's always going to be there, especially in a race situation, just because he has all that experience for one, but also he has a situation where he's got the car. And if he gets the car working as he wants it, then I think we've got a very strong Kimi Räikkönen.
Then we've got...
Can I just do one thing?
Max Verstappen.
Yes. We'll come back.
He's at 20-1.
Yes.
And then Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull, 28-1. That's the two Red Bulls, 20-1 and 28-1.
Yeah. Well, the Red Bull themselves, I think they have to have the right ingredients just come their way. Now everything is going to be about sort of development, and development's always something that Formula One has been very, very good at. From the perspective of what Red Bull can do with both of their drivers, they've got two strong drivers that get themselves in the right, have the right ingredients around you. They're always going to deliver, and I think that's where it's something that I think they're probably at this present time just not really in the right position at the time to attack where they need to be, which is go for podiums, the bare minimum. But of course, then those race wins have got to come their way, and they're just not quite there yet.
Well, let's look ahead then to China. You said the circuit's similar to Melbourne. Is it not slightly more suited for overtaking? Will we not see a more normal, more typical, if you like, F1 race?
Yeah, there are ingredients there. We discussed the sort of the long back straight.
Yeah,
that's the obvious one where DRS is going to come into effect. We've seen some very good overtaking happen at turn 5, I think it is. So you've got the long, brilliant sort of first corner, very, very tight. Turn 2, then there's a straight, little kink 3, and then at the end of it there's a sort of quite a tight right-hander turn 4. There are opportunities there because the corner's very slow. You're going to have all that sort of meaty, chunky tireness that we've got. So there's going to be a lot of mechanical grip coming our way. So the aerodynamics aren't going to be a factor as such. There's the kink I spoke about, but it's a kink. So that's not really going to be an issue following close either. Then you've got the wide possibility to overtake. I would imagine they're your two key overtaking places on the racetrack itself. So they are going to come into play. They have done in the past, and as I said, I don't see why those two points I've just said aren't going to be places where it's going to happen, just because the characteristic of the beginning, coming out of turn 3, and then actually going into the long back straight into that tight right-hander at the very, very end. So they're going to be the right places for it to happen. So they are going to happen for sure, because I think it's just the right ingredients of the new cars to enable overtaking to happen in those two places.
I know I was going to ask you, McLaren talking to Mercedes. What are the ramifications of that? What are the implications?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about this going on. One big thing, and it is a big thing, is Honda are paying quite a lot of money to be in that position of being in the back of the McLaren. Now, if McLaren say, right, we're not interested, we're going to move over to a Mercedes and put that in the back, that money that they had is going to disappear. That's a massive amount of chunk and budget for them to not have, because they've got to find those new sponsorships. Zach Brown is someone who's very good at being able to get sort of new sponsors on board. It's not particularly sort of very attractive at the present time to sort of bring on these new sponsors, because it's how badly it's going at the present time. And then also, a lot of people are sort of rumouring that Fernando Alonso won't be there at the end of the season at the same time. Now, if you lose your Honda, you lose your main man as well, that's going to be very, very tough. I'd be very, very surprised if McLaren sort of say, Honda, move over. It'd be something that's got to happen maybe at the end of the year. It's not going to happen during the season, of course, but I'd be very surprised just because of the chunk of money that's they need.
I think Alonso said, I won't be 13th this season.
Yeah.
He didn't say they, did he? He said I.
I know, it was quite telling what he said.
Yeah.
And again, he's been in that position. It's a horrible situation. I mean, a two-time world champion who is in a car that isn't going to give him what he wants, and podiums are effectively his minimum. He's way off of that, and that's just, I don't see it coming together again this season because they're just too far away.
Mercedes won the last 3 races in China, and Lewis Hamilton's going for his 5th.
Yeah.
So, is that why those odds were looking at?
I think so.
You know, Lewis.
You do Nico. Nico won the first race back in 2012 for Mercedes as a works team. So the car worked way back then. They've been sort of very dominant over the last couple of years. We saw how quick Nico was last year, getting the pole position, easily winning the race itself. Okay, his teammate had his power unit problem, started 22nd, but he finished 7th. At a track that it's still difficult to overtake, but it's still possible to overtake. And I think because of that, we saw how strong Lewis is in China itself. But then you actually say how strong the Ferraris were at the same time. It didn't quite happen for them in the race, but the gap difference that we had at the beginning of the last season was probably a second plus. It's not there anymore. That has totally disappeared. So even the Ferrari that went well last year, it's got to be in a much better position this time around, just purely because that gap's not there anymore. That sort of little turn up the wick that Mercedes were able to do all season long isn't there. So that's where Ferrari is really going to come into play. And although Mercedes have gone very, very well there, I don't think that's going to be the case this time around. I think the battle is maybe going to be even tighter than we saw in Australia.
So different strategies, do you think, for China?
Yeah.
Particularly from Mercedes, I'm guessing.
Well, it's like anything with strategies. There are only certain strategies that you can have. Raw pace is something that you need to have. You need to be able to use. I would still think qualifying is probably going to be their strongest part of the weekend. As I said before, they seem to have that raw pace over Ferrari. But it's a different scenario when it comes to that race again. So that's where the strategy is going to come into play. To me, doing the pit stop they did in Australia, putting Lewis into traffic, that can't happen again, because that definitely didn't sort of help his race. Where Sebastian had a very clean race and a clear race. The only time he was following someone was Lewis Hamilton. So China's going to be very important, as always, to get as high up the grid as you possibly can. But as we've discussed, there's those two corners for sure where overtaking is definitely going to come into play. So the opportunities are going to be there. Where Australia, they are less so, just because of the characteristics of the track again just make it that little bit more limited to overtake. So China, I think, definitely will give more opportunity, and if Ferrari do start behind, which is what I expect, the race they're going to be strong again. Just
look at some of those odds then for China. Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes, 4-3. Sebastian Vettel with the Ferrari 9-5, and Valtteri Bottas 15-2. So he's been noticed. Yeah, would that be fair to say?
Well, I'm surprised.
Yeah,
very surprised, and rightly so.
Yeah,
we've got all the people who were sort of expecting good things, and we saw some good things in Australia.
We've got Kimi Raikkonen in the Ferrari at 11-1. Max Verstappen with the Red Bull 20-1. Daniel Ricciardo, Red Bull again, 25-1.
Wow.
Felipe Massa in the Williams, 250-1.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You having it?
No. I don't think so. Although it's worth £1, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, because I think you never know what's going to happen. One thing that's always, when I'm talking about a coming weekend, it's always about it's going to be dry. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the case when we actually get to China. We've had some sort of wet weather there in the past, and that maybe is something where you have a little bit of luck come your way. There's a little bit of a funny decision with a safety car, for example. Felipe Massa could be in the prime example of having a shock win. So it's worth taking a little punt on that one.
Yeah, if he does win, we probably won't be doing one of these again for BetSafe. So who's winning it for you?
I don't think so. I'm probably going to. I'm only going to do this historically, and I'm going to do it because I think that Ferrari will work very, very well there, and I think it won't be in the qualifying as I've already said, but it will be in the race, because it seems to be Ferrari seem to have a good time management with the car. They have the raw pace that they need. The engine, the power unit seems to be working very, very well at the same time, and it's really going to be down to getting it all right. And Ferrari just seem to have a nice vibe about themselves at the present time, where it's sort of twisted the other way, where it seems to be almost Mercedes are the ones who are doing the catch up for the first time in sort of 3 seasons. So it's something that's really going to be really interesting to watch. But I think Sebastian is going to be the one who's going to do it again.
Excellent. Well, as ever, very insightful. Johnny and I are off on a slow boat to China now. You can check out all the latest odds on betsafe.com, and remember, you've got to be in it to win it.